Over the last week or so, we've been reading our way through the book of Amos at morning prayer. Though it sits towards the end of our Old Testament canon, it's one of the earliest books of prophecy. And as usual, when I read it, the language and the content stop me in my tracks. Amos accuses the people of creating and living within systems and structures which perpetuate injustice, and also accuses them of shaping their community to ensure that they are able to exploit others for monetary gain. The wealthy trade the poor as commodities, and makers bulk out their wares and yet talk of quality, whilst the abundant gifts of the earth are taken for granted. It rings bells, perhaps, as we hear commentary and analysis of the world in which we live in today. It reminds me of that memorable scene from Les Miserables, the comic desperation in Monsieur et Madame Thénardier in Master of the House. Maybe you know it. Laughing at things that cause discomfort, like that scene in Les Mis, it's a known phenomenon. Who among us hasn't experienced that nervous laughter? There's research going on to understand this, of course, but some results suggest that laughter helps us to regulate our emotional state, especially when we find ourselves on the edge of being emotionally overwhelmed. Laughter too, it seems, releases endorphins that appear to lessen the pain that we feel. We might laugh at the ridiculousness of a situation in which we find ourselves, but I wonder if that's where we actually stay, laughing. Amos doesn't name particular groups or individuals as being responsible for perpetuating systematic and systemic failings, but he seems to identify anyone who practices injustice as an oppressor. Instead of loving one another, they damage one another by their trade, in their arguing, and in their abuse of the gifts of nature and of creation that have been given to them by God that all might thrive. So it's made me think again that if we genuinely are the hands and feet of God in this world, offering love and working for the common good, injustice has no part in that. I've seen many of us roll our eyes dismissively or laugh at the prospect of engaging with some of the isms in our society. I wonder if it's because it makes us feel awkward. I don't know. Think about it. Classism, racism, ageism, sexism, elitism, environmentalism, heterosexism. Maybe there are lots of other isms. But it seems to me that this is our task, in fact, to move beyond that nervous or dismissive laughter or attitude. Because actually this is the world in which we live. And it's this that God has set before us, the task in hand. It will be discomforting for sure. And yes, individually we may not seem to transform the world. But we can at least be asking ourselves who it is that we are crushing. Or who are we enslaving? Upon whose graves are we building our castles? It was Amos 8 particularly that struck me, and if I reread it and I continue to turn a blind eye, for example, to my green footprint, I might well be building on my own grave. There's a turning point in the book of Amos where the people are reminded of the hope that we can find in God. And if we continue with those Les Mis references, there is always one day more. You may have seen it parodied this week on the eve of the US presidential inauguration. This one day more has come. It's today. This is the day in which we must choose to live differently to ensure that there's the possibility of another day. This is the day when we address those isms. For tomorrow we'll discover what our God in heaven has in store. One more dawn, one more day, one day more.